I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, which we learned about when I was in infancy. According to my parents, I would kick, scream, cry, whatever I had to do to keep mainly my mom around me. And that was more from the anxiety standpoint of never having life experiences, because I figured that no one would ever be so cruel as to kill my parents in front of me. And that as I grew older, they were more likely to kill them because they figured that I would be able to handle it. So there was also the whole side of I don't want to get older because my family is at more risk. So that definitely caused a lot of anxiety, that someone was going to hurt my family, that sickness was going to hurt my family, and at that point kind of going along with the animism thing to an extent. I was terrified that my dog would get sick, that someone would kill my dog, stuff like that. So it is about 6 o'clock at night on May 13th, which means it's a Monday, which means my week has just started. So I'm definitely anxious from that standpoint as to how the rest of the week's going to go, the amount of homework I'm going to have. Anything like that is automatically going to make me nervous, which I know sounds pretty trivial, I guess, but it's just the way my brain handles the processing. It's a bit extreme. And normally I mention 6 o'clock because I start to get tired by about 4 or 5, and that's when it really starts to set in, because I'm not processing, I guess like a normal person, you would say, but I just don't process whenever I'm tired. I don't process the same way. Everything, it becomes much more extreme. I can't focus. I feel tired a lot. I blow things way out of proportion. And there's no real way I've learned how to handle that yet. As far as presence of a possible anxiety gene, when I learned about that in psych, I was actually pretty surprised, um, because I've definitely had some of the same experiences as my dad, and we all just thought it was, coincidence or something like that, which it very well may be. But I don't know, there definitely could be an anxiety gene. It wouldn't surprise me. But my dad and I, we've had similar things. When we were both little, we were terrified of our parents dying. Although that seems relatively common, most people aren't dysfunctional because of it. But my dad never had medication, never had help with it. People would just tell him, calm down, there's nothing to be anxious about, why are you anxious, yada, yada, yada. But that never really helped, honestly, so the only way he really coped with it, I guess, was just learning by himself and being alive, on life experiences and stuff like that. And the biggest similarities we've had is we both sit on the edge of our chair when we're nervous, especially when we were both younger, which my dad never told me to do, never mentioned, nothing. He said, he didn't want to put any ideas in my head about it, none of it. He didn't want to encourage any of it, change any of it. He wanted it to get better as soon as possible. So that was definitely something that he did not affect, but still happens. And I still do that to a certain extent, but theory of mind sort of thing going on. There were no restrictions on anything in my brain. When I was little, it was absolutely uncontrollable. There was really nothing they could do besides try to work with my brain to calm down. But now that I've, I guess, been able to just grow up and experience the world and stuff like that, it's much easier for me to control the things that I'm anxious about and just say, I really don't need to be anxious about different things, but that still doesn't stop the idea from coming into my head. That's the hardest thing that I still struggle with, is having those ideas in my head and working against them. So, along with the therapy that I mentioned earlier and a bit on the medication, I'll kind of show you the home aspect of that. I'm actually going to cover up all the, I guess, personal information about this. There we go. So this is my Zoloft that I talk about continually in psych. You can kind of see the word Zoloft right there. And that I just take once a day at nighttime before I go to bed. And as you guys learned about, it keeps the serotonin out in the synaptic space area, the synaptic cleft, that's what it's called, right? The synaptic cleft, like that area, you know what I mean, and keeps the serotonin there so that I'm happier. And when I wasn't on the medication, now looking back on it, I noticed a lot of like this continual humming. I know that sounds really strange, but it would basically go around this part of my head right here towards the back of my head. And it was like this continual buzz that I had of everything that I was always worried about. And now that I've, been on the medication and it's helped, it's much easier for me to see that it was probably my subconscious, because it was nothing, but that was what I was used to. I mean, I grew up with that. I'd never known that your brain can turn off in ways, and there are always ideas from the back of my head, or from that hum, I call it, that would move forward, and that's what would usually make me anxious. So that now that that's gone, it's much easier for me not to be anxious during the day. However, I like to create ways to become anxious. And basically, I'm my own worst enemy with this. But I try to just accept that, yes, I am going to have anxiety, which is something that Dr. Schrader and I talk about a lot. And that it's okay, and that everyone has anxiety to an extent. And then when it gets maladaptive, like we learned about, that's when I need to say, okay, how can I fix this? What can I do to make it better? And more importantly, more of like the behavioral side of things and the cognitive side of things. How am I going to change the way I think about it so that I don't cry, so I don't freak out? Really just a personal preference at that point. Just to say, would I rather have the Zoloft and be on that forever? Do I want to be on it for another year or a couple of years, something like that? Or do I never want to be on it again? It's the worst thing ever, something like that. So it's definitely more of my decision. And my family will definitely be able to weigh in on that, and as will Dr. Schrader and my medical doctor side of things. But I would definitely like to be off of it as much as I can be. However, I have a feeling like when I go to college and bigger events in my life, I will probably need to go back on it, at least for a little while until I get used to things so that I can actually function and remind myself that I don't need to be anxious about most things, and that whatever like new changes I have, it'll just help adapt more. I would say that I'm anxious are I pull up my hair a lot. You guys have probably seen that in class. I pull up my hair a lot, and that means that I'm nervous. I like to pick at things a lot, or just do things with my hands. And so it's difficult for me to quit doing that. I don't really understand why, but I pick at my hair, I'll rub my arms, I'll rub my face a lot, and that just means that there's something in my subconscious that is making me nervous. I don't understand why, but that's what's going